Well, welcome everyone. I'm retired Rear Admiral Kevin Cook, and on behalf of the Marshall Islands Registry, I'll be your moderator for today's session on port state and flag state inspections. We're very pleased to be part of this 27th HACC-NACC conference, of which I have to say so far has really been quite engaging. We're the first breakout session of the day, so we'll be testing out a few features with the Zoom hosting. Bear with me if I push a wrong button or two. Really, thank you for joining us, and I'm pleased to see all of you in the audience. Now, I want to start by introducing our panel. First, we have Brian Poskaitis, who's the Senior Vice President of Fleet Operations for the Marshall Islands Registry. Brian oversees marine safety, security, and environmental compliance for this fleet of over 4,800 ships worldwide. He joined the registry in 2007 after a distinguished 26-year career with the U.S. Coast Guard. Among many highlights in Brian's Coast Guard career, he served as Chief of the Investigations and Analysis, where he's responsible for the program maintenance and oversight of marine casualty, marine pollution, and environmental crimes investigated by the Coast Guard. He's a graduate of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy and has master's degrees from the George Washington University and the University of Maryland. Also joining us is Hans Krijger, General Manager of the Roosenda office in the Netherlands, where he also serves as the Fleet Operations Manager. Han joins the Marshall Islands Registry in 2004 as a nautical inspector, and then promoted to Technical Marine Manager in 2007, Fleet Operations Manager in 2009, and General Manager in 2015. Hans graduated from the Maritime Institute, Flushing, as a marine engineer and rose to the level of chief engineer after sailing in a variety of ships, including general cargo, tugboats, reefer, and passenger ships. So between the two of them, there's some really great experience and expertise on the panel. Our basic plan for today is that we'll kick off the session with two short discussions and then use the balance of the time for Q&A. As this is a standard Zoom meeting, there's several options for you to submit your questions. You can raise your hand. You can chat your questions for all the participants to see, and that would be my preferred option, easier for me to manage. Or if you desire to be anonymous, you can chat your question privately to me. I'll do my best to get all the questions in, but in view of the limited time, that may be a challenge. I think we have 20 minutes set aside for the panel. I'll also note that you can privately chat with other individual participants. So let's get started. Brian, I'd like to start by asking you and then have Hans chime in afterwards with his thoughts. But here's the question. What are the commonalities and differences you see with port state control and flag state inspections?
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it, and welcome everyone, and good day to everyone. It's as you can see here, it's a bit snowy, and hopefully I don't lose power or anything and able to get through the session. But you know, commonalities and differences of port state control and flag state. That's a big one. But basically, I would say both port state control inspections and flag state inspections have similar goals in mind. Again, safe, secure, and efficient international shipping, just as the Secretary General referred to earlier in this conference. Now, flag states may be a bit more focused on the efficient part of this goal, but responsible flag states have long found that, you know, you have to focus on safety, security, and environmental compliance as the best way to keep the fleet moving and active in the trade. I would say this is the measure of a flag state acting really as a more modern regulator in this case, referring to the old safety net principle. Port states have long fulfilled the role as a last safety net, as they are well positioned throughout the world to monitor and enforce compliance on vessels calling in their waters. But then again, flag states that pride themselves in not just a good inspection program or regime, but also a competent authority that can outline compliance strategies and can assist vessel operators with navigating the realities of real-time compliance with international rules and regulations, can really strengthen that overall safety net. So the port state is focused on verifying compliance, while the flag state is focused on how the vessel achieves compliance and what measures have really been put in place to maintain compliance. Again, a lot of the focus of my job. Knowing the operators, understanding any difficulties they may be facing with achieving compliance, puts the flag state in the best position to find a robust safety-oriented strategy, really, or safety-oriented solutions to any compliance issues that really are identified when a ship pulls into port by a port state. So in this regard, it's really, you can also see that one of the most important strategies for a port state then is to ensure vessels are in compliance with the international standards even before entering waters or entering their territorial waters, is really that close relationship and cooperation and open communication with the flag state. Whether you're a flag state or a port state or both, as a modern regulator, the importance of the safety net principle, transparency, and open communication remain as important aspects of safe, secure, and efficient international shipping. Hans, I know you have a few thoughts on this subject too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, good morning to everyone. Pleasure to have the opportunity to speak here as well. And as Brian said, I think both parts, port state control and flag, have a role in the verification in the level of compliance. That is the commonality, but the difference here is that port state approaches this from a coastal state perspective, or a memoranda of understanding, the Paris MOU, the Tokyo MOU, what they have to do under their responsibility, and flag does it more as a member state responsibility. Ultimately, the responsibility is with the flag, and it is for the port state control that is not always easy to accept that. And that's where I think the difference is that you have, it's not an easy discussion if port state control, if as a flag who is acting on their behalf as a coastal authority, that you're taking the responsibility as a flag. It's not easy for port state control to let go of their responsibility, but ultimately, as a flag, you accepted an alternative arrangement or a short-term certificate to get to a repair facility, or allow a postponement of a repair because parts or technician is not available. And that's often a challenge, particular in the field, where our flag inspector may be meeting with the port state inspector. And then often it ends up in a standstill position, where we both try to reach a level of compliance, and then is the discussion. It is compliant because the flag is aware, but allows a temporary dispensation for it. Or the port state control says, no, it's not resolved because the situation is still arising. So that is also sometimes a difference of interpretation that we have. And it, as Brian said, communication is important. Ship owner, flag, and port state control have each other in the loop. And often what we also experience is that the value of the flag being involved has a bit more value than the RO acting on our behalf in some cases. So they like to hear it from the flag. And I think then we tap it pretty well in a nutshell.
Yeah, so that really is good. I mean, I think we want to set the stage for everyone that, where at least from the inside the registry view, how we're seeing this. And then I think probably, guys, that the thing everybody really wants to know, though, is how can they effectively use the knowledge of the port state and flag state inspection process and really travel and trade the world trouble-free. So Hans, why don't you just pick up from there?
That's a very good question, and it's not an easy answer because it involves so many of the disciplines that we're working with, and that includes ship crew that has to be able or have the ability to identify, but also to know what is the expectations. They have to know their safety management system. What does it need? What is actually its purpose? So when, and you see that more and more happening, of course, when a number of minor deficiencies have been identified by port state control, there is a safety management breach. So an audit will be required, maybe in that port or in a couple of weeks' time or in a month's time. So, crew is an element. the support, of course, from the company. So actually that DOC, where this seafarer department, the crewing department have to make sure that the STCW documents are there. Purchasing and logistics to make sure the spare parts are there for the in-time repairs and maintenance on equipment. Classification society, of course, who do the service and repair, occasional surveys, verification. Communication. So if there is issues on board the ship, talk to the flag, notify, but also the requirement to report to the port authorities when you call at the port. So if you actually have non-compliance, there is an obligation to report it to the coastal state. So there is a wide area of requirements or things to think of that will help your ship to trade trouble-free around the world. But and Brian can hook on to this with additionals. Brian.
Yeah. Thanks, Hans. That's a really good point to lead in. That's developing that relationship and knowing that you're not out there alone trading. You know, that's where you develop a really close relationship with the flag state, you know, that has an understanding of some of the things you may be going through, that has a network around the world that can assist and talk and help you through some of these issues. One of our goals mainly is, as a flag state, is to provide that value. That's a major goal in our registry, is to provide value to the operation, provide value to the owners and operators. So the last thing I think an operator wants is another inspection, okay, or audit. They they are faced with these on a routine basis from every stakeholder involved: port state, flag state, charters, class societies, right ship, etc. Providing value means more than just your inspector getting on board the ship and implementing a flag state inspection program. It means focusing on important issues. Inspectors not just looking to find defects in a ship, but working with the crew on board to impart some of their knowledge and get them involved with compliance.
Yeah.
As Hans, as you were saying earlier, most good owners and operators know a good and dedicated crew is one of the best ways to look after an important asset as a ship.
Yeah.
Focusing on that crew's knowledge. And I think you said it earlier also, the real-time implementation of the safety management system on the vessel as a whole is a very important area. And it's often an important area, but remains one of the areas that often may delay a ship. The typical areas like firefighting, life-saving, and environmental compliance. A well-trained crew with time in their day to look at these and pay attention to some of these areas, and walking through an inspection that's not just looking for defects, but looking at how that implementation is working on board a ship, can really provide some value in the operation. And that's where a lot of the focus needs to be, in that behavioral change to influence that, the folks right on the ship understanding what they need to do. So,
Brian, if I can just add a few items on that. Talking about safety management system, companies' internal audits are valuable, and they can be used as a training opportunity towards the crew, from the rating till the senior officers, understand that safety management system. And it is important that internal audits have actually some comments in there, because if port state control has deficiencies, they will ask for the review of the internal audit report. And if those internal audit reports are empty, not established enough, they don't have really a content, it really feeds them to say, okay, we'll require a safety management audit by the RO. So if you do those audits, your internal audits, make sure they have some weight, they value, and that can be verified when port state control has some deficiencies. Okay, the 1 or the 2 or 3 deficiencies they have found, they are rare, they are occasional. At least they have a verification that you have a properly implemented safety management system through your internal audits.
Yeah, great. So I would encourage, if anyone has a question, again, the easiest way is for chat, but we'll be looking at those. But in the meantime, I wanted to follow up with Brian. So you had, generally we talk about how do you travel the world trouble-free, so to speak, but of course it's a great advantage with all the regional and then local offices that the registry has, 28 or so, as we said, around the world. On the other side of that, we've also had to explore the virtual inspections and continue some aspects of that. So, you know, on one hand, we're a touch point in the local port. On the other hand, you know, we're reaching in through electronic means to ensure ourselves of the vessel inspections. Could you just talk about what you might see in the future that you've learned through virtual inspections that you might carry on into the post-COVID world?
Sure, Kevin. Yeah, well, I have to say we've learned a lot over this past year, especially the value or and sometimes the limitations of doing these remote inspections. We started down a road of implementing a temporary inspection protocol back in, when was it, Hans? March of last year.
Yep.
And we've done almost, I'd say, up to about 1,000 remote inspections now on board ships. And again, I have to tell you, a lot of our real good surveyors and inspectors had real thoughts about whether there was going to be any value in doing a remote inspection. Some of them really were not on board at first. But I think some of the strategies we've learned throughout the year doing these is really how to tap into, really to gauge the implementation of how you know, the operator and the crew are working together.
Yeah.
Because just doing some of those basic things that you may have taken for granted before, because you're getting on board a ship and really looking for defects, we're focusing more on the communication. And that's, I think, been a real positive strategy for implementing the remote inspections, and something we'll probably carry on into the future after the whole pandemic. So Hans, I don't know if you had more on that.
Brian, I do, you know, I think, and we talked about this, I think we saw very positive developments with remote inspections. Of course, it was in the beginning of the pandemic that, of course, ships and seafarers were pretty much left on their own. Surveyors wouldn't come, port state control wouldn't come, flag state wouldn't come. And here was the flag who was showing actually their interest or responsibility by approaching the ship's crew, giving them a responsibility and doing the verification of the level of compliance of their ship. And I thought the level of response and the quality of response that we got was very, very good. And what I think was also very interesting is that ship crew apparently do have an ability to solve problems. Because, you know, now they couldn't get the superintendent or a technician or somebody on board. So they actually had to be more creative or actually focus a bit better on the problem. And they actually solved a lot of problems themselves as well. So I'm coming from a time where you actually had to work without a safety management system. For me, a safety management system was like, oh, why do I need it? But now you could also see that people still can do something also outside the safety management system. So I thought that was very, very curious.
Yeah, and that's probably the single most important thing we've learned, and it's really been a positive influence on some of the behavior on board the ships and in that, because like Hans said, the crew is much more involved now, and they're you know, often, you know, they're taking it more seriously when they're asked to show that this is working properly, rather than just the inspector walking behind them on the ship or looking at a piece of equipment being tested. Okay, so I think that has had a big effect on influencing behavior and putting it back in the position of the crew actually participating more.
Yeah, well, I know I'm sure everyone on the call is looking forward to the post-COVID world, and you know, there are a lot of reasons I am very excited to see things move along, but it would be a shame not to bring those things that we learned with us. So I'm glad you're thinking about that. So Hans, how about the relationship with the RO, and how has it evolved over the COVID time, and how do you feel that it is now, since for like a registry like Marshall Islands, we depend on the RO in many capacities to act on our behalf?
Yeah. Kevin, communications with ROs have tripled, quadrupled in amount of questions and how do we do this, extensions. So there's been a very pragmatic approach on these matters. So the COVID time has definitely made that connection stronger, multiplied it. So it helped us, of course, and though we communicate with our ROs twice a year as a minimum, laying down expectations from our side, but also hearing from them, from we as a flag, what do they expect from us? But it probably opens also an era for opportunities that will probably develop in the time ahead. The remote surveys, of course, doing remote inspections. I think certain elements of the statutory surveys can be done through a remote, and we don't have to bother the crew all that time in port with a surveyor. So but that is probably things that have to filter or water down and see what elements can be used.
Yeah, I got a chance to sit in on the the latest semi-annual RO meeting that the registry conducted, and I have to say that because of the remote participation, some of the best participants from the class societies were involved, not just because they were available without traveling conflicts and things like that. It had presented an opportunity for quite a rich environment to share the information.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So I think I'd like to make one last call out to the audience and see if there are questions that you'd like to have answered. And in the meantime, so Brian, could you talk a little bit about how you're organized worldwide? I mean, it's quite a footprint that the registry has, but it's especially critical in the fleet operations department, so that you're maintaining the annual inspections and sometimes even more than that for the various vessels, utilizing your own staff and a very minimum of contract surveyors. So could you give people an insight on that?
I think we may have lost Brian, Kevin.
Would you want to comment, Hans, or I can go ahead? I can answer the question, I guess. But Brian had quite a bit of snow yesterday, and his electricity wasn't so reliable in his neighborhood.
Hold on. I think I found a message from here.
Yeah. So I mean, the key thing I was hoping to draw out in that question, though, is just the fact that people like Hans covering primarily the European area,
let me answer, Kevin. Sorry, Brian is indeed, he had a big bang and everything is out, so sorry about that. Yeah, we've also our inspections had to take some how you call it, a step back, because on time limitation import. We do facilitate, but yeah, you have to be pragmatic. So when the opportunity is there, we take it, and if it's too much hassle, or I mean not too much hassle, too much crew change, for instance, short time import, we just say, okay, we'll postpone it to another time, and if we can't do it, we'll do it in a remote. So there's been, and that's also, of course, also flexibility that you need from the owners and the managers. They need to also give you that space. They need to identify it also to you. They don't have to feel like you maybe having a rope around the neck. They must do. But speak to us, and we'll see what is the best solution that we can offer or that we can do.
Yeah. So I think that kind of the regional distribution of responsibilities really helps in that regard, so that when you're trying to work with an owner, you're close to the time zone that the ship is in, where you're trying to make that arrangement. So
yeah, that's Kevin, that is, ultimately with the 28 offices around the world in the different time zones, speaking the local languages, whether it's in Germany, whether it's in the Netherlands, whether it's in South America, whether it's in the Far East, whether it's in the Middle East, that is very, very helpful. With the surveyors, with the port state control, all of those issues are very, very valuable, of course.
Yeah. So I know we've actually gone over our scheduled 20 minutes by 5 minutes or more, and the organizers were, very, very nice to let us go on. I know they've also notified us that the main conference is resuming and probably has already resumed. So I really would just like to close by thanking our two panelists, Brian Poskaitis and Hans Krijger.
Pleasure.
And also all of you for joining us. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this HACC-NACC conference. It really is a fast moving conference from what I can see. Lots of work went into making sure that everything was ready to be launched right on time. And so I'll let you go on time and rejoin the conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.